karma of tardiness, but it was impressive out there on the 405 tonight. I mean, really an impressive display.
Pretty lights.
Oh, they look good. All right. Yeah, there's been my teacher. He is known for being very punctual, and in fact, the only time I think I ever saw him in wrathful mode was one time when someone was late for a very high teaching. And then his teacher is known to have a kind of maybe more of a deeper understanding of the emptiness of time and like what that can mean. And so it's always intriguing to see like, okay, what is, we talk about like the potential of all things and everyone. So it's really great to apply that to time, because that's easily one of our number one hang-ups. And as I, was coming down tonight, and I'm like, I'm looking at just all of this impressive display, and I'm watching the moon rise and so forth, and thinking, wow, this is really great. And like, there could be no one there, but at the same time, it's taking it back to like where it's all coming from, right here. So yeah, how some people doing some of the give and take, some of the Tong Lin last week. Anybody put that into practice? Yeah. How was it?
I never knew before last week that you could do that on yourself before.
Mm.
And it had occurred to me that I might benefit from doing it on myself, like way back when I first learned about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I never did it because until you mentioned that yes, you can, and you start with yourself.
Right.
So it was really wonderful.
Oh, great.
It was like magic.
Excellent. Juan, were you going to say that?
No, I was just going to say it's kind of fun. It's like walking around and just doing it randomly, and it just brightens up your day.
Yeah, excellent. It really is too, and it's that secretive part as well. The fact that it's not all about you doing it, and getting acknowledgement for that, which is what becomes really intriguing, particularly when you are doing it on yourself, like you or Veronica as well, because then that starts to help to break down that distinction between you as you're projecting yourself and then you as your own concept of yourself. You can start spinning in on that within that meditation all on its own, let alone like walking by someone and doing a little, just in the happiness of your day. But that's very, very good to hear. Yeah, I don't know if I did mention this last week, but I know we had talked about that it's great to start with yourself, with Tong Lin, and then certainly to then also use it with those that you do love or who are your friends in your family, and then move on to someone who is neutral, like a total stranger, someone who when you go to the Starbucks or whatever, it's a person you always see, but you don't know, you don't have a label for them yet in terms of their name. And then they suggest moving on to those that you dislike, simply because, it's to be quite honest, it's a little bit more challenging to do this practice with someone that you have trouble with. And at the same time, it's what can be the most powerful practice for that. But you guys know yourself better than certainly anyone else, excluding your teacher. And within that, you can see what your capacity is to do that right now. So if you feel up to it, that you're like, yep, okay. Like, I don't know who it was, you mentioned Veronica last week about some organization or group that you were like, yeah, I need to Tong Lin them. Sometimes, if you really feel that, then go for it. Yes, Smith Barney. So excellent. Well, that's very good to hear. All right, well, let's bring ourselves into the room and start off with a meditation. Yes. So, get your body situated in a way which you feel comfortable. So if you're sitting in the chairs, to move towards the end of or the front of the chair and with both feet on the ground, unless you can be in half lotus sitting in it. And have your seat firmly planted so you feel like a strong tree as you kind of rise up through your spine. And then pull your shoulders up to your ears and hold them there for just a second. Squeeze them up there and then let them drop. And do that one more time. Pull your shoulders up towards your ears. Hold them there for a second. Let them drop. And one last time, pull them up. Hold it and drop. Now roll them back once and let them just fall and rest there. Check that your head is nice and even, that you're not leaning too far forward or too far back. Feel nice and straight in your spine, which keeps your chest open. Then start to focus on your breath. Just watching it enter nice and cool and move out nice and warm. Just your breath. That's all you need to focus on. One thing. Take a moment to feel happy about the potential of your mind to realize how things are truly working. Think about what it will be like to have the direct experience of that potential. And see all the people in your life that are helping to guide you to realizing the full potential of your mind and your heart. Bring to mind your desire to help others, to serve others. Just feel that in your heart. Invite that person that you most admire in your life, that you most respect for the way they treat others, for the way they live in this world. Invite that person to come and meditate with you. See them sitting right in front of you, smiling with those shiny eyes. And think about what it is that you admire about them most. Offer them a gift for being in your life. Now share with them any acts that you regret having done today. Take refuge in your understanding of karma, cause and effect, your understanding of emptiness, the potential that exists within everything and everyone. Make a promise to yourself not to do that particular misdeed again for a certain period of time. Be reasonable. Don't overcommit. And think of what you can do to make up for it. Now rejoice in the good things you have done today. All those little moments. And look at your teacher, this person you admire so much, and ask them to continue to teach you. And that they stay in your life as this healthy, happy person for many years. See them rise up in the air, becoming smaller and smaller as they float towards you, turning around, facing the same way you are, and they come to rest right above your head. And then they descend down through the top of your head straight into your heart. Where there is a beautiful light radiating. Now bring to mind a close friend or family member, someone you really love, and see them sitting in front of you, happy to be here with you. Just focus on their eyes and their face. Now place your mind in their body and look through their eyes at you. Think, what do I want from me from this person's point of view? What do I want from me from this person's point of view? Looking from their body at yourself. Remember these things the next time you see this person or you speak with them. You can relax your focus and slowly open your eyes. The more you do that meditation, the more intriguing it gets. It's actually one of the particular ones we'll be getting to a little bit later tonight. But it's also I find very good to do experientially first, and not try to intellectualize it. As soon as you can get the perspective clear. Because I know the first few times that I heard it, I kept thinking like, wait, who? And kept switching it around. But the more you start to work with that, it will be very illuminating as to what you perceive needs to be done in this life. So let's do a little review, since we have some new faces here tonight. So we went pretty deep into Tonglen last week. And Tonglen in the sense of giving and taking, so that the whole practice is, if you are doing the Lin, is that you are taking on this person's pain, the suffering that you perceive. And then if you're doing the Tong, you're giving the happiness that you perceive in your life. And it's something that the more clear your understanding of what we've been calling emptiness, the potential, the availability that's apparent in our lives, the more that you do that practice with that understanding, maintaining your sense of, okay, well, this person is not self-existently suffering, or the fact that when you're imagining and visualizing all of the good things you could be giving to this person, all the things that would make them so happy, is at the same time realizing where that's coming from. So constantly bringing to mind whatever your understanding is of this potential. That's exactly what will speed up your process to realizing an enlightened state of mind. I mean, that's the power of that practice, is that it accelerates how you're experiencing your world from moment to moment. So, bless you. And what's the point of that? I mean, when we say these things like, you can realize an enlightened state of mind, you can realize eternal happiness. What does that really mean? And for each one of us, we need to define what that means, because that's the ultimate goal right there. And you can easily define it as that you'll finally have the realization of being able to help any being precisely how they need to be helped. And the way it has been taught to us, and saying taught, is that in most cases that will be teaching. And how that teaching manifests in your life can be countless. You can walk in the room and give someone a profound teaching about what it is to be happy, what it is to be content. And I mean, there are beautiful stories about people who have come into this practice and come into this lineage of sharing with, like, well, how did you come across this? How did you come across the path? And then you'll hear these things like, well, I was at a party and I saw this guy across the room, and he was just like, everything just seemed to be right with him. And I started talking to him and everything. And I thought, well, I want some of what he's got. And that right there is that, as they say, is that the most powerful way to teach is by example. It's how you're living. And that's not putting on necessarily, as they say, the happy face all the time. Because there can be a moment in which you appear to be quite upset, but ultimately it comes down to how you're responding, how you're dealing with whatever is upsetting you. So it's that's what needs to be clear in each of our minds as we're doing this. Is how is this bringing us? Doing this practice is bringing me more quickly to that, so that I can do that. In an effortless way. Yeah, it's important to realize with the Tonglen practice, which is so beautiful and profound, that it isn't a matter of you being able to pray someone's cancer away. And that's very important to make that distinction in your mind, because what's really going on is that it comes down to you acting in the world with this compassion and with this understanding of how things are working. That's exactly what the practice is. And it's like when you're doing that, there is this immediate positive effect you start feeling in your life. Just the fact of those moments when you're walking by someone and you're breathing in whatever you perceive their frustration or their bitterness or their upset, and then you're exhaling out something joyous for them. That whole process of doing that is that, especially when you do it, you're doing it in this anonymous way, that just starts to feel good. It's like, they didn't even know that I just did that for them. And then the next step, of course, goes that you're actually starting to plant those seeds, which are the perceptions that you'll have, which are your world. As we discussed, that's it. That's all your world is anyway, is just your perceptions. So that's exactly what you keep shifting and planting in your mind again and again and again. And that's where you can see that it's not in the sense of that I'm praying that this terrible disease goes away. That it's something, for me personally, it gives me much more traction to see how I'm actually living that in the world, and not something that's remaining what for many people could easily be conceptual, just some type of thought. It's got blood, and it's got heat, and it's got your breath, and it's how you're living. And that's what makes it practical, and that's what makes it useful in the most profound way. And we didn't actually get into this, but in the sense of how you start to shift your world is you'll notice this, that the things that start getting better are really kind of even what we would say are sensory things, physical things. That you start to appreciate just how beautiful the sunshine is, like in a particular moment. Like, man, it's so beautiful today, and everything is shiny and so forth. And then there's you're tasting some food, and you really are like, this is so delicious. And you're hearing a song on the radio as you're driving somewhere, and it's like you're there in the studio with them, singing right next to them on the mic, fully feeling it. And all of these kind of sensory experiences like we have when we're kids, and the way we're taught is that so much of when we're young and we're born is that we do have all of these tremendously good karmic seeds that are ripening so fast when we're young, because everything seems to be so new, and that's the first time you've seen purple, and it is the most amazing color to you. And that's what's so great about this practice, is that you start having experiences like that again, where everything does seem very fresh and alive, and as we like to say, awake, and that ends up being just some of those benefits that you're like, this is great. I wasn't even expecting this, you know, for like the chocolate cake to taste this good. And in those moments, of course, do it for yourself. So much so is that you bring like, and this is not coming from its own side, you know, that this taste is not coming directly from this cake, you know, and because in those moments, that's exactly what then further down the road as your life continues to get better and better and better, you won't be having an attachment to those sensory experiences. So yeah, it's an amazing thing when you noticeably improve the quality of your life with your concern for others. That's really what it is. You know, that's what's so exquisite to me about the whole practice, is that your life is getting better and better, and that it's getting better and better because you're thinking about others all the time. You know, what seems like the great paradox, you know, in the beginning, and why we talked about, like in the first class, why they kept this practice so secret for so many years, because there's many people that would just immediately be like, first of all, that makes no sense, you know. And then as you start to get into the understanding of how it can work for you, you start seeing it. You start seeing it happening. So let's move on to the third point. If people, maybe you can take, I know some people don't have this with them, but I want them to be able to share it. So I don't know if you want to, these are there to share with, there's a nice group there. And if anyone else, yeah, to share with each other, that would be beautiful. That's a beautiful karma to share. Share this sacred teaching with each other. So this third point in the practice is, this is the one that's all about using problems as opportunities. And if, actually, Kelly, could you go ahead and read the first two lines of the third point?
Yeah. When the world and those in it are full of bad deeds, learn to use problems as a path to enlightenment.
Yeah. Yeah, so when the world is full of bad karma, and, you know, meaning that you think, you say, you do something harmful, that's what you're going to use as the path to enlightenment. And it's important here to notice that Chikawa, who wrote this, that he didn't say when the world is full of problems. He says full of bad deeds, and that's an important distinction there. Because, you know, first of all, that sets you up for thinking that there is some self-existent problem. You know, that there's some problem that is a problem from its own side, has a nature of itself, and I just need to try to figure out how to deal with it. Versus the fact of, the issue is, how are you dealing with it? Those are the deeds. The deeds which can be then either good, in the sense of you're focused on, how can I change this for the benefit of others, versus bad, versus what, you know, how does this affect me? You know, when things are going wrong, it's imperative to look at the emptiness of the situation. I mean, this is what makes all the difference. And it gives us the opportunity. That's where the opportunity is because, as we talked about this last week, is that it just seems to be our habitual behavior that when things are really screwed up, you know, we have the sense of like, okay, well, now I can potentially learn something, which is great. We need to make use of that, versus when things are really grand and we're really enjoying it and it's a beautiful day and it's great time out and so forth. You know, we tend to also in those instances not think about like, well, where's this coming from? But in this particular situation, we're focusing on like, what is the source of all of our problems to begin with? So when something terrible is happening, this is the moment to say like, well, the truth of the matter is the reason I'm experiencing this is because of what? It's because of something that I did in the past. And that's where, you know, that is sometimes a very hard pill to swallow, depending on what that problem is. Thankfully, that pill gets smaller and smaller with time to eventually that pill no longer exist. You know, and that's the purity of this practice, because it really reveals what the main source of your suffering is. You know, it's how you've acted. So in each, and this is not, and this, you know, once again, this is not about self-flagellation, you know, because that right there in and of itself is something that's going to create also another bad karmic seed for yourself, is then to beat yourself up in the moment, you know, like, I did this, I'm so terrible, you know, and you go into this like total Macbeth mode with it, and you know, then you'll meet the same fate as Macbeth, you know, the kingdom will be slayed and you will be killed by, you know, and just, it's a bad story with a bad ending. And that's not what this is about, you know. It's about the moment of that you sit there and you're like, okay, I realize where this is coming from, and I realize what I can do about it, so that I do not experience this again, and also that I don't see this cause playing out for others in my life. You know, so those are the two folds of it. You're not seeing it happening to you, and you're also not seeing it in your world. On the most basic level, in terms of the, you know, constructively using the problems, when these travesties happen, is to be grateful for them. I mean, on the most basic level. If you can somehow, and it doesn't have to be, you know, when you get that call on the phone and you hear someone you love crying on the other end, and they tell you someone you love just died, it might not be, that gratitude might not come within 1 minute or 5 minutes, but if you can get it fairly soon after, then that seed of being able to feel gratitude for an understanding of where this death is coming from in your mind is going to pay off unbelievably down the road. Because what that does is that will shift your whole perception of death, ultimately, to the point of where you will not be experiencing that in any way the way you're experiencing it now, in any way like that. So, you know, to be grateful and to understand why this is happening, and the first thing to do when the problem arises is to ask why. You know, that's, you know, the first thing you do is that you have this gratitude, and then you say, you know, why is this happening? Why am I in this current situation that I don't like? You know, that is very unpleasant to me. This is how the problems make you aware. They make you very aware of what's really going on. And then they also deeply sharpen your understanding of emptiness by realizing where they're coming from. You know, and that's, you know, we keep drilling it over and over again, because this understanding and using whatever label works for you in terms of ultimately how things are happening, the potential, the availability of everything, is that realization of how things are working. And it's in those moments which is a moment of impeccable union. Because what's happening there is your body is fully engaged in something. If it's anger, it's got tremendous heat. You know, you feel yourself getting hot. You can literally feel your muscles getting taut. your neck kind of riling up. You've got your emotion, all of those seeds of emotion are fully blossoming. And then what you're doing is that you're bringing your mind into play at the same moment. So what you have there is this priceless union of using what this is, using what you've got in this life, your body, your emotions, and in your mind to get right to the core of what is really going on and how to shift the situation in the future. And you don't want to pass that up. What's great is we have so many opportunities through the course of our day to do this. There's so many opportunities that we run into a situation, we experience a situation that we really don't care for, we wish was not happening. And I hope, for all of us that's on a scale which is not that upsetting, because it really is. We all know, as the saying goes, that our emotions can run away with us. And it's a very beautiful way of putting it. So when it's on a level that it's like, okay, I'm not going to totally freak out right now, because Bob is asking another asinine question in this meeting, but it's to actually think about like, okay, yeah, I've asked some questions that probably didn't necessarily need to be asked before. So I'm not going to fault this person who I've created to do this right now, to do it again, for myself. If you start to really adopt this attitude with everyone, then you really can start to see everyone as an enlightened being who is exploiting your weaknesses for you. In every moment. We certainly are very aware of many of our weaknesses, those that we consider, those that we pay attention to. But the key shift in that attitude of looking at someone as simply trying to help you out, to realize your highest potential. And that is a way that can actually bring up some gratitude in your heart in that moment, is that, as we discussed, keeping those beings that really push our buttons close. And if you say to yourself, because sometimes you might even have to say it out loud, that it's like, yes, I realize you are helping me to realize enlightenment as quickly as possible, as pissed off as I am right now, and but just hearing yourself say that, if that doesn't kind of make you jump tracks, in that moment of kind of frustration as to like, right, that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. That's what I really want to believe they're doing. I was talking to a friend earlier today, and he's an actor and writer, and he's got some very good things going on that have happened this year. And he said to me at some point, and I don't know what his particular practice is, if he has one or not. But he said, what happened was just earlier in this year, there was a certain point where, I was looking around at some of the people that I work with on a constant basis in this business, and I started to just let go of how I've been seeing them all these years. And that's the same thing. And he said, there was a particular moment where it was a really tough moment. It was a really big job. And he's like, in that moment, I consciously chose like, okay, I don't know how this guy's going to react to this. I really don't know. He ended up getting the job, and this ended up being a significant shift for him. Like, huge shift for him in his whole year. And he said, I ended up getting that job, and everything since then has been like, and he's like, and I kept thinking about that. Then the next time, and then this other project came through, and this got published, and this happened, and so forth. And one thing after another, and it's like, that was it. The moment that he shifted his perspective of how he's been looking at these people in his life, to like, okay, maybe they're trying to help me out, and it worked. It worked. Geshe Michael, who has so perfectly and beautifully passed on this practice, he talked about that there are two kindnesses that really you can pay to someone in these moments that you have problems. And one of them is the type where you act in deference to an issue that's happening. So take for instance there, you know someone in your life who tends to be quite jealous. And they're a good friend of yours, and they do get jealous. So the way in acting deference to that would be that you realize that this is an issue for them. So you try to protect them in situations where that jealousy could be spiked. So you're acting in respect to that, to that quote unquote problem. What's considered to be even a higher kindness is to actually, someone who this person is particularly jealous of. So what you do very skillfully is you try to get that person around that person as much as possible. And that's something where then when you do that, you try to help them get over that with the Dharma, with your understanding of emptiness and karma. And that doesn't mean that you have to use those words specifically, but that's what you're then trying to do, is that you don't get this person into what is kind of throwing them into the fire. It's just what we were just talking about a few minutes ago. You get them in that moment because that's when the problem is fully activated. But the difference is that you're there, and what you're trying to do is plant these seeds in your own mind of seeing you try to help someone out with this particular problem in this way. So both are a kindness. The reason, and it's a higher kindness in that way because, quite honestly, those seeds ripen so much faster, because you're going directly to the heart of it. You're going directly to the heart of it. So be careful though in doing that. I mean, that's a case-by-case basis, and you really have to be very mindful of wielding it that way. You got to feel up to it, and you really got to feel as though you've got the right motivation and understanding of what that situation could be like, because it's got that higher level of potential. Quite honestly, as they say in Tantra, because of the danger involved. There's some risk here now, and that risk is exactly what can propel you and this person forward at a much greater rate. But be mindful of that. Kelly, can you read, I think it might be, maybe it's just the next line?
The blame all belongs to only one person.
Yeah. So, who is that? Yes, one's self. That's perfectly stated, one's self. Yeah. I mean, we've gone over and over and over it, and every unhappiness that you experience, or I should say, there is no unhappiness that you experience that you didn't create yourself. And there's the facts. And we'll keep we'll keep putting that up and testing it, testing that in our lives. When I was just back in Ohio, and I was hanging out with some very, very devout Catholics, very strong practitioners in that faith, and it was wonderful. I mean, they wanted to get into this Buddhism thing, and it was really great, because at one point, this wonderful woman said, she said, I get the thing about how bad things can happen to good people. I get that aspect. But what about the good things happening to bad people? So now this, of course, this opens up everything, Immediately, of course, is like, you start with the emptiness side of like, well, this person's not self-existently bad, and then there's the karmic side about like, well, why would there be a difference between those two to begin with, and it was really perfect, because ultimately in the conversation where it came down to is that the principal understanding in this particular path, since all the paths are leading to the same point, is that you are taking full responsibility for what's happening to you in your life. Full responsibility, total, complete. There is no one else to blame. And so once you get over the initial, the initial pity parties about that, which we all do, and those are some good parties. I mean, those are some really, enjoy those parties. Come on, what the hell did I do to have a car drive into the living room of my house? This happened with my dad in Colorado. Car literally drove into the living room. And, this was a situation where he easily could have been sitting in that room. His wife could have been sitting in that room. They easily could have been killed by that. He fortunately was sleeping in bed and really didn't hear it until his wife came in and was just like, Rick! Car drove in through the living room. And in that particular situation, when someone says, like, what, fortunately, my dad didn't say that to me. Like, what the hell did I do to deserve this? So that was really actually very good karma, that he didn't even question that to me. And that's, so yeah, it includes that too. It includes the car in your living room. And so it's essential that we realize that all that ever hurts you is your own bad karma. I mean, that's all that's hurting you, is how you've hurt others in the past. And it's our own selfishness that's the primary generator. That's the machine that's putting that all into play. You can always bring it back to, even if you think earlier in today, there was some aspect when we were doing that confession in the beginning meditation of like, what is it I regret today, and so forth. If you go back and you look at that, there was in some way something about that was self-centered. Something about that was self-cherishing. There was something within that was, what about me in relation to this? And fortunately, that's the thing, that's the thing that you then mindfully say, I regret this, and I want to purify that. I want to clean that plate up. And once again, it's essential that we go back to the root of our sin, the root of our selfishness is our tendency to misunderstand where it's coming from and to misunderstand who we are in relation to that. In each of those instances. Okay, Kelly, what's the next line?
Practice seeing them all full of kindness.
Yeah. Which is such a beautiful way to look at this. So them is is all the problems, be it people or circumstances. And being full of kindness, since that's what they are, since they are your inspiration to understand where your suffering is coming from. You know, so they're so, in that sense, they're being so kind. They are full of that potential. You know, that's the emptiness of the person that breaks up with you, the person that wants to get a divorce. They are full of that potential. If you give them that, you know, this gives you the power to see that, to be able to see what you're experiencing with this person in that way.
And Brian, just something that I noticed in this, that is your practice.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing the full kindness, that's
Yes.
practice, that's the path.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Something that in situations when you have somebody that you see going through suffering,
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that if I see them, sometimes it's like, oh, they're doing this for my benefit, to teach them a lesson, teach me a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I make a huge mistake of saying, oh, so it's not really that bad for them. So really it's like a lesson there for me if I need it, but like they're okay. You know, it's just, they're putting on a show, for my sake.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I think that's interesting because sometimes it's like, and it just shows our ignorance. I don't really believe they're suffering unless I think they're self-existently suffering.
Right.
Rather than, it's that jump of saying, yes, it is your karma, but that doesn't mean that it's just all fake.
Yes, because that's a huge bad seed you don't want to plant. That this is just fake. You know, that's the thing about it, and you know, and that's where you can fall back to your compassion position, because you wouldn't want to think that. You wouldn't want to create that kind of situation ever for yourself or anyone else. They're looking at you, and you know, you've moved far along a lot, you know, in the path that you would have some person literally be able to say to you, you know, Jed, don't do this for my benefit. You know, don't die of cancer for my benefit. You don't have to do that, because that seed could ripen in that way. You know, and that's why it's, you know, we're constantly with that, like, no, it's not self-existent, but at the same time, this is the relationship between emptiness and form, is that's the interdependence of the situation, is that they are here, you know, as they say, like this is the flesh and the form that they're using. And so it constantly is a beautiful, that's the kindness of the, you know, of the wing of compassion in that way, is that it can really support then the emptiness that you were bringing to that initial moment. Like, you're teaching me this, so that's perfect. You know, but that moment to be like, ooh, when that starts to be like, no, they're not really going, it's like, well, wait a minute. Not really. First of all, what does that mean?
Right.
You know? So no, that's a great point. That's a great point. What's the next? Oh, sorry.
Along those lines, then, if I'm looking at that as myself, and I'm going through suffering, and I maybe or maybe not have a good sense to be able to disempower that suffering feeling, and let it go, rather than potentially giving compassion to myself for whatever those suffering things are. I almost immediately go, oh, okay, it's not that big of an issue. And I just wonder, is there almost like it's bypassing for somebody else or for myself of just like, okay, seeing the emptiness in it and just kind of moving on.
Yeah, this is, you know, it becomes, when you have those instances of that, yeah, that there is no bypass. I mean, that the two work hand in hand in this sense of and not saying emptiness and compassion, but emptiness and karma, which is the fact of you are constantly working, here and now in your life with what you perceive to be, and we'll use real. And another way we can say is to be working. What's working for you? So it's working for you that, there are people, there are human beings in your life, and they're having a whole, different array of problems, be it a physical or emotional. And so you're constantly giving yourself this opportunity of like, this is my canvas. This is what I'm working with. So for you, whatever would seem like in a moment of disavowing what's happening in some way, which is kind of related to what Jed is saying, then that is that there is some level of actual denial of what's happening for you in your life. Because first it's like as it's ripening in your life, it's like this is what's happening. And so this person, whatever, they're very hurt and so forth. It's like, okay, now it's when you start applying what your understanding is of emptiness and karma and compassion in those moments. But at any point that even something that would appear like you're kind of stepping over that or bypassing that or like, that's not really, that's not really it. First, you're dealing with what seems to you to be really it. I mean, that's what's happening 65 times a second, and so in many ways, which is exactly what we're going to be getting to the next point, is constantly reaction. I mean, it's constantly reaction. It's kind of funny in some ways to say that we're acting, because you could easily, it'd be a great debate point to like talk about, are we really acting or are we really reacting, in this life? Because for us, in terms of trying to shift our mind view and our hearts in this way, it really is, we find ourselves constantly, it's in the response. It's in the response. This is what's really happening. They're really upset. They're really upset. So now I realize where that's coming from. But I also want to plant the seeds in my mind of seeing me try to do something about that, understanding at the same time that it is coming from my mind. And that it doesn't have any nature of its own, but it's still pivotal that you see yourself, your body, your mind acting in the world this way. All that's happening in the reaction. All that's happening, as you know, sometimes in nanoseconds. As they say, like the child running into the street and grabbing the child, and so they cut to the news clip and it's like, I just reacted, Well, there were extremely powerful seeds in that person's mind to react, to protect life in that way, So if anything, it's us constantly kind of catching up to that with all of this of what we're being taught, to the point to where then we collapse that gap. There'll be the point we won't need that anymore. There'll be the point that what we're talking about here with karma and emptiness, we won't need that anymore. So yeah, we'll go deeper into that in this next line. Kelly, can you read that?
See the deception as being four bodies.
Okay, and the line after that as well.
Emptiness is the matchless protector.
Let's go right to the emptiness aspect of that. Fundamentally, in this practice and in this path, is that emptiness ultimately ends up being what you take refuge in. And it's, in some ways, you could almost say it's the only true act of refuge. So you know, there's when we talk about taking refuge in the three jewels, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and in the three jewels within those, all of those are in relation to emptiness. You know, we're saying the Buddha, we're talking about, you know, the emptiness of our own minds, the potential of our own minds to realize enlightenment. In the Dharma, we're talking about the direct experience of emptiness, the direct perception of that. And in the Sangha, we're talking about those people we consider to be in our lives here and now that can teach us about that. You know, that can teach us about that. So, you know, every time, for those of us who take refuge in that, we're taking refuge in emptiness. It's at the core of all of that. In relation to, you know, our favorite prototype of the, or archetype of the angry person, is that, you know, essentially what's going on there is that based upon our past acts, our mind is organizing these shapes, colors, and sounds into someone screaming at me. You know, that's that's in almost kind of like a scientific way of looking at it. But what is paramount to remember in each and every one of those moments is that emptiness protects your heart and mind in the reaction to that. That's where the protection is. That's what that line about it being a matchless protector. Hold that thought. So why? You know, why is that it actually is protecting, you know, my heart, my mind in that moment, is because it's the right thing to do? Because it's the moral thing to do? Yes. And if you refuse to collect this bad karma again, then you will get rid of this guy, this angry guy, and then you will get rid of all of them, to the point that one day you'll just realize that basically you're living in heaven. That's it. You know, so that's where that's when we talk about the fact of it's protecting you. It's this shield. It's this shield from like any moment that you could plant a bad seed that you're going to have to deal with later, some terrible reaction to it. It's in that reaction, it's in that response that you're bringing that together, and you are doing it for all those reasons. That this is the nice thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And this is also the sole thing that's going to prevent this from ever happening again. You know? And if I keep doing it again and again and again and again, all it can do, if you have any belief in karma and cause-effect, is that eventually there won't be any more. That's it. You know? That's the math. And then there's living this life. You know? Then there's driving home tonight and what happens on the freeways. And there's getting home, and there's waking up in the morning, and everything in between. But it's the ultimate protection in that way. It's the ultimate protection. So, Kelly, can you read on?
Yes. The 4 acts are the supreme method.
Ah, yes. So this is good. This is, you know, we get into the the more secret language here. So, you know, what are the 4 acts? so it's a cute. Well, it mentions the 4 bodies earlier, but in relation to the 4 acts, this is pretty much about the karma. So this is the first is collecting the good karma. The second is purifying the bad karma. And then I love the third and fourth, which is making offerings to those that harm you, and it's making offerings to those that protect you. And of course, you can see those as one and the same. But they're being, you know, they're being very understanding of many of our levels of working in this world, which is understanding, for most of us, we might actually be seeing those as two different people quite often. As like, and so what it is like when you're making those offerings, you're making, you know, it can be this, you know, let's be quite honest, a lot of the time it might be the mental offering, you know, the mental offering of holding your tongue, you know, of not saying what you're really thinking right now, or you get into all of the fun acts that can be, which is that, you know, you literally get like their absolute favorite Starbucks, you know, triple espresso latte with all the like bliss cream on it that they can take. And, you know, you got that on their desk when they get there and they never, you know, they don't know who that came from, you know. So it's really great. It's very powerful to do that for the person who you constantly have a problem with. But at the same time, you also want to continue to generate, and let's be quite honest, sometimes this is easier for those that you already perceive that way, you know. I think it was Geshe Michael said that, you know, the reason that heaven is eternal is because you keep giving in this way. You know, that's the reason that it's eternal, is that you're giving. So this person seems like they're harming, this person seems like they're protecting me, and you just keep doing that, and then it just is just this. You know, it's just this. Can you go on, read on?
On the spot, turn all that happens to practice.
Yes. So this is fairly straightforward. I mean, all that happens, you know, refers to whatever the problems that keep happening in your life, you know, be it with the people or the circumstances. And turning them into practice means, you know, on one level is that you use them as a reason to think, to put your mind on compassion or emptiness, you know, whatever works for you in that moment. You know, because sometimes the emptiness thing isn't happening. You know, you might literally even bring the word to mind and you're like, no, you know. But the compassion, like you're thinking about, like, all right, you know, I really want to open up my heart here. And this is what's so effectively done by using Tonglen, of course. You know, that's what that whole practice is being able. So, you know, when you're on the spot turning all that happens into the practice, that's what we're saying. What's so beautiful about the Tonglen is that, you know, you're walking down the street, you're walking to the office, you're walking to the house, and you can just perpetually be doing this. And that ends up being that ends up being the life that you do create for yourself. And it keeps going back to that, is that, you know, you're creating this life. You're creating this life. So let's take a break there before we go on to the fourth point, and then we'll pick up on that. Okay, so the fourth point. This one's all about really how to live in a meditative state of mind all day long. This is very much what this one addresses. Yeah, and of course, like, okay, well, what's the point? All right, big deal, meditative state of mind. So that sounds nice. It sounds like that would be very calming. But of course, that's one of the benefits. But ultimately, is that you're living in the state of mind in which you are embracing everything that's happening. Everything is an embrace. Every person, every moment, and this point in the practice beautifully illustrates that. Juan, do you have the reading there as well?
Yes.
Can you read the first 2 lines of the fourth point?
The brief essentials of the instruction are combined within 5 powers.
Ah, yes. So the instruction, of course, being the 7-point practice that we're developing here, and the 5 powers. So we're gonna bake through these. The first one is resolutions for the future, and this is the one where when you exercise this power is the one that you do very much at the you very much do it at the top of your day, at the beginning of your morning. It's what you do to set the tone of the entire day. I get, pretty much our human tendency when we get up in the morning is to, it's so practical, is immediately take care of ourselves. You get up, maybe you want something to drink, maybe you got to pee. Maybe you're someone who immediately likes to brush their teeth. Maybe you like to get something in your mouth pretty quickly and eat. You're hungry. Yes. I love my wife so much for this because when we first started dating and so forth and started staying over at each other's places in New York, we were in Manhattan, she lived down in West Village, so there are all these, awesome cafes, literally within 50 feet, of her apartment. And we'd wake up in the morning, and I mean, for me, it felt like 5 minutes that she'd be like, okay, what do you want to eat? And I was the polar opposite. I mean, I was literally I'd get up and maybe I don't eat for 2 or 3 hours or something like that. And I can remember, and this was what's so great about when we've talked about okay, well, what is ultimate love? It really is you're thinking about the other person, what seems to be happiness for them. So that was a great practice because I was not hungry and I did not want to do that. And I was sort of hey, whatever you want, and that karma has shifted. I mean, she and I now are actually kind of more similar in that sense. But back then, it really was that, which was, even in that moment, the thoughts that came up immediately were so it's not necessarily oh, this is what you want to do. That's something this is what I don't want to do. So that's so much the first thing we're doing right as we wake up. So what we're doing with this power is resolving to stop thinking that way. Before literally your feet hit the ground, stepping out of the bed, you're thinking about what is it I might do? Either for someone in particular or in general, you kind of maybe you set some really kind of operatic tone of the day, it's on that kind of scale of today, I am just going to literally try to get a smile out of every person I meet. That would be huge if you try to do that. I mean, that's really setting the bar pretty high. But that's essentially what that power is about. And when you realize that, that every problem to begin with is thinking about yourself first, then then you can get up in the morning and go to, eventually when you make your way to the mirror, then you can, and you do this with absolute compassion. I mean, you look in the mirror and you smile and you say, there's the cause of all of my problems, you know, and you look at this person, just you're smiling like, yes, you. I'm going to change that, and that's what you do. You resolve to take care of others at least as well as you take care of yourself throughout the day. So the second power is referred to as accustoming yourself. And this is really regarded as the most important. If you're gonna exercise these powers throughout the course of your day, this is the one you really want to focus on, which is the fact of that you habituate yourself to taking care of others first. I mean, that's exactly the behavior you want to start ingraining in your lifestyle. And this Geshe Michael taught about this, and it's such a beautiful nuance to this, which is that it's about learning how to transition properly. If you think about you have actions that you're doing throughout the day. If you have a particular job or whatever, and let's not even go to the job. If it's your morning ritual, because we all have our rituals that we tend to do, and we do that, and we do this. Between each of those are kind of the significant transitions. Of course, each and every single moment we experience is a transition, but just kind of looking at the significant ones is that you pinpoint those moments. So, for instance, it's like, okay, because we have all these spiritual rituals that we do in the morning and so forth. So my thing is that one of the things, the first thing I do is that I'm going to the altar and I'm doing 3 prostrations to the altar. Then I'm looking to see, okay, did she do the water bowls or did she do the food offering? Then so I know I'm going to go do that. So in between, doing the prostrations and in going to either fill the offering bowls or the food, in that transition, I use that moment to think about helping someone else. To think about what is it? That's a real easy way. Because at first you'd be like, wow, okay, that could be a lot of thought involved with that. Actually, it becomes quite simple because it can be in relation to exactly what's going on in that moment. So if it's at your job or something like that, and you're working on something, and eventually you need to go to the bathroom or something like that, then you're getting up and you're walking across, and then you're looking, you're like, ooh, transition. So then you're looking over, you're like, I wonder if, did she get that thing, whatever that piece of the project she wanted or something like that. You use those moments, those shifts in between what are significant acts throughout your day to get your mind constantly in this mode of because this particularly happens in our jobs. It's good. We should be focused on what we're doing and what's being asked of us, what the task is. But then that's what happens is you have these transitional moments. You got to go to the bathroom, or you need something to drink or something like that. Or you got to go ask such and such about something. So it's in that, so when you, when you sit, when you stand, we say that during the course of class, you have this moment where you're you really focus and the teaching is going on and you're really present. And then you get an itch, and so, you kind of itch yourself. So right there in the itch, you're like, oh man, let me focus on what this person was saying. Right there, I mean, just there, you're planting the seed of just off of me onto the other. It becomes very, very, very powerful as you're doing this, because ultimately what we want to do is we're really looking at absolutely crushing our tendency to think about ourselves first all the time, which is what we're doing 99% of the time. So this is a really beautiful, kind of subtle, elegant way of doing that throughout the course of your day. And here are 3 particular ways that you can overcome some of the selfishness as it relates to working with other people specifically. So the first one is that, we all do this. We all do this in our own ways, which is that when you read another person's body language to get a sense of something that they might want, you're reading their eyes. So, like for instance, they come in the room and you have a glass of water or something like that, and you notice their eyes kind of go to your water, so you're immediately like, let me go get them a glass of water, or you ask them, that. And and we see what's great about this practice, and one of the many great things about it is when you focus on reading people's body language and what their eyes are going to and what their eyes are communicating, is that, think about it, you're planting the seeds to be able to read something very subtle within other people, very subtle energies, which can then break down to basically thoughts. That's where this is headed. Is that because then what you find out is that you do go get them a glass of water and you bring them back and they're like, oh, thanks, man, that's exactly what I wanted. And you're like, that's very good, glad to give them something they wanted. And so you do it again, and then there are of course the ways that you do this, of course, anonymously. Where you see it as something happening with some other person, they're not in the room yet, and you see them come in, they don't really recognize you or are aware of you, but you're reading, they seem really tired or something like that, and if this is a person that would be appropriate to do this with and in the right situation, that you go up and you start like rubbing their shoulders or something like this. I remember this. I was on retreat, this past summer, and we have many different types of retreats. This was a very active retreat, and so there were a lot of things that needed to be taken care of. And I can just remember at one point, I was madly discussing with someone else. I was like, okay, we're going to do that, and we get over there, and we're going to pick them over there, and so forth. And one of the other practitioners, I didn't even know he was there. And I just immediately felt like some shiatsu master had placed his right here, and I was like, oh, yeah. And honestly, it's like I felt like my whole heart opened up in that moment. And yes, I then eventually took a moment to look at who was doing this. But in that was so, what he did was just so perfect. It was so perfect. And he knew that was exactly what I needed. So that's what this practice is about. And like I said, we all do this, but now you can load it in this way. So the second way to do this, of being able to overcome our own selfishness with this, is to do the meditation that we did at the beginning, which is where you're switching your bodies, and this is, as I said, extremely powerful in being able to understand specifically what this person might want of you. It just becomes amazing how revealing it is. Of course, and this is the thing, is that's what we say, you use this with someone because you've accumulated a lot of karma of experience with this particular person. And so now when it's like you're placing your mind in their body and you're looking at you've got that dynamic set up, that relationship set up, that you can then start to plumb. And this, honestly, this has freaked me out sometimes. There are things that, I've practiced with people I've known for years, and in that meditation, it's like, my God, I never knew they wanted that. I never even thought about that. And so that, that's where this started really getting traction for me, because that's the whole thing, is that you are very specifically visualizing them in your mind, and with that transference, it becomes remarkable. So practice that meditation. And then the third way is what Geshe Michael calls the rope trick, which is where you bring, and you can do this in meditation, or you can do this in the workplace, or do it in your home, which is you choose someone and you throw a rope around the two of you, And if you need to do this literally, please do. Certainly if you think this will not, if you think the person will have some fun with that, especially when you're not revealing to them why you're roping them, and it's you make it very fun and so forth. But and obviously mentally you do this where you really do. You kind of you rope yourself around a person, and you pull them close to you. You pull them close to you, and this is obviously very, very good to do with someone that you have issues with at work. And so throughout whatever period of time, if it's you can rope them for 5 minutes with you, or if you can do it, for significant chunks of time, for an hour, a few hours, it's at the workplace and so forth, so that everything then that you're doing during that period of time is with them. You're doing it with them, and you're conscious of that, is that, well, I've got Jason with me, and it seems like, you're not trying to get like a Sybil state of mind here, of like multi-personalities and so forth or anything like that. It's the awareness of the fact of like that you actually are thinking in relation to this person who really is functioning with you in your life right now. And it's amazing what can come out of that as well. And it's great obviously to do it with, if you have a partner or someone in your life, of when you rope them and you're thinking to yourself, especially when there's some problem going on, you're like, I've had you roped this whole time, in your mind. And it's amazing how that frees you up a bit, lets go of a bit of whatever the frustration might be. So the rope trip becomes very handy. And hey, you start getting go with it, rope some more, open up that lasso, throw like 2 or 3 people in, and then you're really doing something pretty powerful. Okay, so the third power is referred to as pure white seeds. And this is fundamentally, what we refer to as like mental seed, karmic mental seed management. And it's great because there's essentially 2 reasons why. There's 2 reasons why you're really not seeing a pure world all the time. And it's probably self-evident to you already. First, of course, the first reason are all your old bad seeds. I mean, that's the one that's probably self-evident. So the question becomes that, can you eliminate all these horrendous bad seeds before they bloom? And the answer is yes, you can, fortunately. And a good place to start is to look back on your life and start to identify what have been your major afflictions. What has been the behavior that you have acted with that you can identify, yes, and I did that then, and I did that with that person, and I did that with that job. And so you really start to categorize them. And then the next important step is that you commit yourself now and through the course of your day to doing the opposite of that. If you were someone that really easily flew off the handle, if you had a big issue with being angry, then on that particular day, the white seeds that you're going to do there is that you are going to exert bionic patience during the day. Whatever the provocation might be, you are going to have tremendous forbearance. And then when you experience those moments throughout the day where you're like, and it could be the smallest thing. It can be in traffic or whatever it is. But then in that moment that you exert, in this case, patience, then you dedicate that seed to the elimination of that affliction in your life. So you identify the heavy hitters, and then you commit to doing the opposite of that. And then when those moments arise throughout the day, those opportunities, then you dedicate, and this is dedicated to me no longer ever doing this again. And how this really works out is that it accelerates those seeds happening at a lesser and lesser degree. We talked about the pill getting smaller and smaller. So that's the power of it. There's so much tremendous mindfulness that you're bringing to that action that it is. You're going to find yourself like all of those big, those big pieces of luggage you've been carrying around for years start coming up again and again. But then you've got this practice of like, okay, I'm going to do the opposite of how I have behaved in the past with that, and I'm going to dedicate it to this no longer being the case. So it makes them ripen faster, and then they lessen. Fortunately, they lessen and lessen in degree. And it's essential that those moments that you do the opposite, that you do the helpful thing for yourself and for others, that you make it very clear in your mind, you make the imprint in your mind that this affliction is being purified. That's what that dedication is, that this is being purified. And that's critical. That's critical in this. And of course, the second reason is obviously is that, we keep planting new bad seeds. So, obviously with this practice, it's you use it against each other, which is like, okay, they keep, so I'm trying to stop that. Once you understand emptiness and that your mind is constantly under the influence of your karma, then there really is only two things left to do in life, which is to clean up the bad karma and create good new karma. Yeah, Kelly.
I think a little stuff I was reading today that if there's a cause, then there's definitely an effect as far as karmically, and then if there's a cause, the outcome will be bigger and greater. So you're saying that we can actually sword that in half and create it to be a lesser of a bloom, or we create a seed to make it seem not so big of a bloom?
That's more accurate. So yeah, it's number one is that it's your power, that the seed that you're planting there, and that dedication to that is whatever the power is that you're exerting in that. So if it's patience, or if you found that you've been a relatively frugal person throughout your life, so then it's like you're exerting generosity. So what you're planting then is for that seed to be more and more powerful. So it'll be bigger and bigger and bigger. So, and that's exactly what's minimizing the other. So it's so it's good to make that distinction. Very good. Yeah.
So is it really through the powers that are you never really purifying the deed? Like for example, in that case, I might if I've done something bad, I'm gonna get in a car accident. But now because I've done the powers, I'll get in a car accident, but then I'll get a settlement that gives me $1 million. I know that's way overly simplistic, but is it or is it that through the dedication you actually are creating karma to minimize the negative?
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, that's where, this is like what we were talking about earlier about when it's in the reaction. And if in this, The reaction is the dedication, you know, and that's in your mind stream, that's the purifying process, you know. So, and how that encapsulates, you know, how that imprint registers in your mind then ends up flowering in what will be a similar way. But that's, of course, because you can easily look at that logic and saying, of course, it's like if I'm being a very generous person, then it must mean I'm not being very stingy in a given moment, you know. So you can see how, and that's kind of the beauty of, you know, with karma and looking at when it says like, you know, you don't, you don't create the crime, there's no foul, you know. You create the crime, you will pay, you know, and it goes just the same way with, of course, something that's meritorious. You know, you do the good, you know, so in that moment of dedication, that's exactly what you're doing, is that's the purification, that's the act of it. Yeah. All right, the fourth power, destruction, which is, you know, this is about, you know, this is just kicking ass on every single selfish thought that you have. How do you know when you're being selfish? I mean, this is a very important question to kind of contemplate at a deeper and deeper level. Yes. And you're right. There's definitely some truth in that. There's definitely some truth in that. You know, in a way, you know, in thinking about this, it's that if you feel any distinct emotions of unhappiness, then you're misperceiving things as self-existent. And ultimately, you're self-cherishing. So, you know, and I stress that ultimately, but misperceiving things as self-existent, because this is how emptiness it is. It is the understanding of it is the matchless protector. It is the ultimate liberator. Because that's what can get you through what seems like an unbearable moment, you know. And we all have this, and we all are experiencing, as you said, you know, even breathing. But that level, all the various levels of unhappiness, there's something within that we're grasping to, you know. And who is grasping? I'm grasping to that. You know, that's just it. You know, that's right there. That's the misperception. You know, that I am grasping to that. I need that. I want that. You know, I think this is the way this should be done. You know, and that becomes, you know, that becomes very useful when thinking about, like, okay, was I really being selfish in this moment? You know, and we have talked about enlightened self-interest, you know, and there absolutely is that, and exert that understanding. But that's what we mean here about this fourth power, destruction, destroy. That's, you know, that's your number one enemy. That's it. That's it. The fifth power is beautifully and simply referred to as prayer. And this is, you know, this is beautiful. It's when you go to bed at night, and you lie there, and you just start, you know, you just start reflecting on what went well today. What went well? And it's really, you know, and as you're lying there, and it's great because think about this. It's like, you know, this is how you're going into your unconsciousness, is thinking about, like, oh, that went really well, and that was good, and then we did that, And I actually did do that for him before he even asked. And then you dedicate that, we say dedicate that to your two loves. And your two loves are compassion and emptiness. You know, which is when we talked at the beginning of this this series, which is that it's ultimate bodhicitta, you know, which is that it's the direct perception of that emptiness, that you will have that in this lifetime, and then also what we refer to as the deceptive bodhicitta, which is that you will realize total happiness in this life, and you will teach others how to do it. You know, those are your two loves. You know, that's your love. It's like, I want to know ultimately how things are really working, and then I also want to realize eternal joy, and to be able to show every other living being also how to do that in their own way, you know. And that's just such a, that takes you right in to your unconscious, and then those, you know, then that garden gets some nice water while you're sleeping. So just that simple prayer, you know, think about that. Think about that. And we, there's a particular practice with this. I think we'll cover it next week. That then gets into how to use that practice for what is the most critical moment in our life, which is our death. And that's the power of this practice, is that it can prepare you for that. It can prepare you for that. And you know, the simple reasons for that is that falling asleep is a similar type experience to dying. You know, it is where the mind starts to break down and get fuzzy, and at that same time you're drifting into an unconsciousness. And so the amazing beings that have given us this practice and understand this process have shown us a way to not only be able to you know, ready ourselves for that, but to also be able to teach it to others. And I'll be quite honest with you, we don't teach this practice much because our belief is do your practices now. You know, do all of these practices about living in the world as a loving human being with an open heart and understanding how that really works, so that you won't even need to do this practice. This is one, as I'm saying, as it relates to death. Not the going to sleep at night and having the prayer. You do want to do that. But this as it relates to the process of dying. So, yeah. It's amazing that they're giving us a practice. They're giving us the practices to work 24/7. You know, it's a very there are higher practices that deal with that state between when we go to sleep and when we wake up in the morning, or whenever that might be. And but here here you can see how the seeds are being planted that you can be that eternally happy person, you know, that eternally happy being, you know, because you've got something now that's just working all the time. And so certainly with this, you know, with the week ahead, definitely try the switching the bodies practice of seeing that person that you know and placing your mind within them, doing that meditation, and then also the rest of these that really seem to pop up in your mind, because it's popping up for a reason for you to do something about it. Yeah. Thank you so much all for coming tonight. Happy meditating.